Now I want to introduce our speaker, who I think needs little introduction with a Fort Worth crowd, but bear with me. Ruth and I go way back. She helped me very early on in my career as a young museum professional. And so I am pleased to be able to introduce her. She has been influential in researching and preserving Fort Worth history and Texas women's history for many, many years. She's a book contributor to Grace and Gumption, and celebrating 150 years of pictorial history of Fort Worth, and most recently, Texas Women, Their Stories and Their Lives, which is the winner of the Liz Carpenter Award for the Texas State Historical Association just this year in 2016. So today, she is going to talk about the historic event that was Caruso's performance here in Fort Worth in 1920, something I've heard about as a Fort Worth native my whole life, and I'm very interested to hear the background. So with that, I introduce Ruth Karbach.
This lecture is dedicated to the archivists and librarians in the local history section of this very library, both past and present. In fact, Max on the back row back there is the person who first brought out a diary of E. Clyde Whitlock and showed me his notes about Caruso's performance. So I'm really thrilled that Max is here today. When a fall concert tour of North America's cities by Enrico Caruso was announced in 1920, there was a rush to book the tenor with the golden voice, even at the hefty fee of $7,000 for one appearance, which is the equivalent of $90,000 today. By the fall of 1920, Caruso was in his 16th season with the Metropolitan Opera and had performed opera series and concerts in 31 cities in the United States, but had never come to Texas. Caruso's popularity was gained in large part from his recordings of operatic arias and popular songs. He began recording in 1902 during the infancy of the record industry. By 1919, his contract with the Victor Company, later RCA Victor, of course, was earning him 10% of worldwide retail sales of his recordings, plus $10,000 monthly. That'd be $125,000 salary a month from just the record company. Unlike many haughty singers, he saw the potential of the new technology. In 1910, Caruso sang from the Metropolitan stage during the first wireless broadcast, and this is in the United States, and this is regarded as the start of the radio industry. He also starred in 2 silent movies for Paramount Pictures. The 1918 film My Cousin contains scenes from Pagliacci during an actual performance at the Metropolitan. You can view it on YouTube. Just remember My Cousin and Caruso. The women of the Harmony Club of Fort Worth set their sights rather high and managed to book Caruso, even though Fort Worth would be one of the smallest places for a performance by the world's greatest tenor. But this club of women musicians and music lovers have proven their ability to manage international stars and tailor their concert series to succeed where other local Texas efforts have failed. Lucille Lions, who had guided the Harmony Club in their concert series had graduated in 1920 from the first president of the Texas Federation of Music Clubs to the national president of the Federation of Music Clubs, which met often, guess where? In New York City. Lions and her Fort Worth Confederates knew the drawing power of Enrico Caruso, who had reached celebrity status in both North and South America, as well as he was well known in Europe too, but not so much celebrity. Fort Worth folk regularly read about Caruso in a New York music column carried by the Star-Telegram. Many a Texas household with the Victrola owned Caruso recordings. A local newspaper editor wrote that until the booking of the opera superstar, the city had been the state leader only in baseball. A contract was signed on May 29th with 22 Fort Worth businesses, 8 individuals, and Texas Women's College, now Texas Wesleyan University, stepping up to the plate with the guaranteed concert fee. And we have someone in the audience who is associated with the Fort Worth Opera, Susie Williams, and her grandmother, who was actually one of the underwriters. And she always reminds me that Quentin McGowan's grandparents were too. When Dallasites learned that of the Fort Worth coup, they tried to come up with the money for a Dallas concert, but failed even with backing of the Chamber of Commerce. In August, Lucille Lions met with Caruso's tour manager at the only facility in Fort Worth large enough to accommodate the anticipated crowd, the Fort Worth Coliseum in the Stockyards. Emblematic of Cowtown, the Coliseum was completed in 1908 as a state-of-the-art livestock exhibition hall. But this day, in August, in the heat, the site of the world's first indoor rodeo was not impressive to this gentleman accustomed to the elegant Metropolitan Opera House with its fine acoustics. Standing in the intense heat, he stared at the remnants of a recent cattle show and questioned how this colossal barn could be made into a concert hall. Lions ably detailed the scheme for conversion, but was met with skepticism. Ultimately, her companion asked if she was planning to shoot the pigeons circling the interior of the building. And he quickly learned that this sophisticated Texas lady did not tolerate facetious remarks. Use of the Coliseum was probably smoothed by Lyons' husband, whose business was at the Stockyards. Local publicity was excellent since Lyons' ablest lieutenant was Florence Schumann, the wife of the advertising director at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Ticket sales by mail from 5 states filled half the seats before the local box office opened 1 month prior to the concert. Box seats were $7.50. Other seats ranged from $2 to $6, plus 10% tax to pay off World War I debts. These tickets would cost $25 to $90 today, and I'd pay it, wouldn't you? The organizers promised the public that there would be a straight wooden floor covering the arena's dirt to protect them from damp and cold. In addition to a special stage, Caruso's management had demanded installation of dressing rooms with baths. The Prince of Tenors was a fastidious dresser who bathed twice a day. Also, the star required soundproofing in his dressing area, and an expensive fire insurance policy was necessary because of the tenor's chain smoking backstage. Manpower to accomplish the conversion was hard to find because laborers were flocking to the booming oil fields. The construction was completed to the tune of $2,500, about $30,000 today. Then there was a big hitch. Seating of 5,716 had been planned, but ticket sales had reached 6,800 the day before the concert. Chairs were mustered from 2 churches and the Chamber of Commerce. Preparations were also made at Fort Worth's premier hotel, the Westbrook, for Caruso and his entourage. 14 rooms were refurbished and redecorated. The famed tenor had a suite of rooms with a baby grand piano, handy for his impromptu rehearsals with his accompanist. The 2 young rising performers touring with Caruso, his warm-up acts, so to speak, were Italian-trained American soprano Alice Miriam and American violinist Albert Stossel. Marian had just signed for her first season with the Metropolitan Opera, and Stossel was admired for his military service in World War I. He went as a band master, but he did go to the French front and was already known to the public via his recordings playing his Stradivarius. Caruso's business manager and suave private secretary, Bruno Zarato. I know he's suave because he's so suave in the movie, My Cousin. Suave private secretary Bruno Zarato completed the glamorous party, which arrived by train from Tulsa on October 18th, the evening before the Tuesday concert. The next morning, the 5 Fort Worth hotels were full, even with extra cots provided. The Chamber of Commerce operated a registry to help the 1,500 out-of-town visitors without rooms find housing in private homes and rooming houses. Fort Worth merchants sold formal evening attire, new hats, and recordings by Caruso and Stossel. After Caruso checked over the arrangements at the Coliseum and gave his nod the morning of the concert, the Harmony Club hurriedly added 200 more chairs. The box office was rushed for the new seats, and soon 1,000 standing room only tickets were all that remained. The tenor spent part of Tuesday morning ambling around Fort Worth and being plagued by newspaper reporters. My apologies, all. Caruso popped into Monning's department store to purchase a bottle of perfume extract priced at an extravagant $37.50. Many odors offended Caruso, so he needed a ready supply of perfume to spray in rooms as well as on his person. He lunched at the Fort Worth Club with Lee Miller Blake and her husband, a cotton broker, Lloyd Blake. Mrs. Blake was the sister of Fort Worth native Fayreen Miller Keith. And I'm going to, let's see, this is Fayreen. This is Caruso's bride there. And Caruso, of course, and his best man. Fayreen Keith was very important in this marriage. She encouraged the marriage, which was an elopement due to the bride's father's objections. And this is Dorothy Benjamin, his only legal wife anyways. Tuesday, well, the romances of Caruso is like an opera. It really is. Tuesday afternoon, Caruso enjoyed a silent moving picture and may have seen 20-year-old Gloria Swanson starring in the just-released drama, Something to Think About, with music by a live orchestra at the Palace Theater. Or perhaps he opted for a comedy, Everybody's Sweetheart, at the exotic Egypt Theater with his pipe organ. A sense of celebration seized the city as the sun set, with opera lovers parading by foot, car, and horse to the Coliseum. There were 15 Fort Worth police officers, including the motorcycle unit, managing the heavy traffic up to the Fort Worth city limits. Police Chief Everett of Niles City, what we now call North Fort Worth, had 8 men to deal just with the parking. The doors opened promptly at 7 p.m. 45 ushers, Texas Christian University male students, were so well trained that the seating of 7,000 people was managed in an orderly fashion. The standing room only tickets sold out. An audience of 8,000 excitedly anticipated the arrival of the artist. Ticket sales totaled an astounding $26,000, that'd be about $331,000 today, the largest receipts for a single performance by Caruso. Caruso, dressed in evening clothes, wearing buttoned patent leather shoes, and carrying a soft black hat, arrived by limousine, according to a Star Telegram reporter, at 8:16 p.m. and entered the rear of the building up a cattle ramp, all the time playfully imitating a bull. The concert started promptly at 8:30 p.m. and followed Caruso's standard tour pattern, with the 2 other artists performing before the famous tenor. Oh, I forgot that one. This is actually at the Metropolitan, but this is the way he may have been dressed as he went around Fort Worth. Yeah, isn't that amazing? Just before Caruso stepped on the stage, a photographer took a flashlight photo of the 8,000 people in the audience. I don't think it'd meet fire code today, do you? Tension was high as Caruso took the stage. The consummate entertainer gave a big smile with a sweeping look at the crowd and roared an infectious laugh of pleasure, and the audience laughed in response. The maestro's first aria, Ci Galita Manina, from Puccini's La Boheme, received thunderous applause. 3 French and Italian love songs, followed by a humorous number, served as Caruso's encores. This is him in character as he would have been singing that at the opera. The violinist and soprano did several solo pieces before Caruso again took center stage with his second aria, Una furtiva lagrima, from Elixir of Love. This is a recording with a contemporary, like a modern orchestra added. And Renee's going to kindly play it for us. And just sit back and think you're in the Coliseum, listening to the world's most famous tenor. Yeah. It's hard to really imagine what his voice must have been like live. And what you're hearing, of course, was done through a megaphone and with the most primitive recording equipment. So you just have to almost imagine in your own mind what he might have sounded like at the Coliseum. When Caruso led off his 4 encores with a poetic love song in English, the audience was so enthusiastic, several even applauded while he sang. The encores ended with the challenging Tarantella Napolitano by Rossini. In the final section of the program, all the artists brought down the house. What else could be the finale but the great Caruso singing Vesti la Gluba as Canio in Pagliacci, the role most identified with him. This was an earlier recording. It's from RCA Victor, so the orchestra that you hear is actually the orchestra that was behind him playing. So it's going to be a little different sounding. The audience could no longer contain themselves. They cheered, they whooped, they whistled, they stomped the floor, they threw fedoras, Homburgs, and Stetsons in the air. They just went crazy. The gratified star quipped, after he kind of quieted them down, "I've never been stampeded before." After the 2-hour concert, a private reception at the Southside home of Lee and Lloyd Blake, you know, the sister of the matron of honor, was given in Caruso's honor. The party was a great success, with the Neapolitan-born tenor singing for the crowd and having so much fun that he did not return to his hotel until 4 a.m. The next day, Caruso went by car to the State Fair of Texas in Dallas for a few hours before catching a train from Fort Worth to his only other Texas stop, Houston. The tour of 12 cities had exhausted Caruso by the time of his return to New York. His letters to his wife throughout the trip reveal that he had suffered worries and aggravations. In addition to his hectic schedule that year and his recurring health issues, I'm sure you could understand they were pulmonary at that point from his cigarettes, he suffered local officials and prominent citizens' ideas of what would show off their city to the Italian tenor. I think the two best examples were his reactions in Tulsa and Denver. In Tulsa, they decided that he should see an oil gusher coming in and loaded him up on a train and took him out there. When the gusher came in, he hid. The noise was frightening to him. It may have been because when he was in Cuba in September, a bomb was set off in the building while he was performing, so that might have had something to do with that. The biggest problem there was the train broke down on the way back to Tulsa, and he just barely made his performance. In Denver, they took him to see a herd of buffalo. And he just, you know, this man was born in Naples. He was not a country boy. And, you know, those shaggy beasts just, he didn't, why would I want to see dirty shaggy beasts, you know? But the Fort Worth engagement proved different from other stops where he visited with the family of a friend and enjoyed himself just sauntering around downtown. Caruso wrote to his wife about the Fort Worth trip. The concert was the best one of the tour, and I enjoy myself. In December at the Metropolitan, Caruso mastered his 62nd opera role and was working on the role of Otello for a future debut. Serious worries rose about his health when he had a throat hemorrhage during the first act of an opera. At the Met performance of Samson and Delilah, he suffered an accident that further impaired his health. In the temple scene, one of the pillars hit his back and injured a kidney. On Christmas Eve at the Metropolitan Opera, Caruso sang what proved to be his last performance. He was in agonizing pain and his health had seriously deteriorated. He and his wife and young daughter traveled to Italy, where he had several operations, and he died at age 48 of pulmonary pleurisy before a planned surgery to remove a kidney. The homage to Caruso at his funeral and following, this was the crowd outside the funeral. His body remained on public view for 6 years before entombment. That helps us appreciate the significance of his concert appearance in Fort Worth when you think about the reaction to his death. Cowtown was now the music center of the Southwest, declared Lucille Lions in her New York Times article in 1923, and it was due to the hard work and savvy of Fort Worth women, which culminated with the performance by the great Caruso. Lions' management of that concert gave her credibility when she formed a booking agency for fine arts performers. Not only did she provide Fort Worth residents with several subscription series over the years featuring international talent, she booked acts for venues throughout Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. During the Depression, Lions served as a federal regional music director as part of the Public Works Administration, which provided work for musicians and free concerts for the public. Caruso's appearance encouraged Fort Worth residents to attend a number of opera productions in the 1920s by the Fort Worth Civic Chorus. Operas performed infrequently during the Depression were made by touring companies, but after World War II in 1946, a professional opera company was formed. Today, at 70 years old, the Fort Worth Opera is the oldest continuous opera company in the state. I hope you enjoyed learning about Caruso and Cowtown. Thank you, Renee. I have books for sale. The lovely Carly Klein, Sandy Guerrero Klein's daughter, for this other person that worked at the Star Telegram, is back there. The Texas Women's book and the two Grace and Gumption books about Fort Worth women are for sale.
Q&A.
How about questions?
Did he have any microphone or?
No. No microphone. And the recordings, it was like a megaphone that he sang into, and it was recorded directly onto the disc. The musicians, if there were, well, he had a pianist on his early ones, his accompanists were behind him. That's why they are so disturbed.
When he performed at the Coliseum, the crowd could hear his remarks as well?
Apparently so, because they were well reported.
He had a pianist as an accompanist here?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Do you
he
know
did.
who that was?
Well, I do, if I can remember. He had such a big entourage. Gee.
That's all right. That's all right. It wasn't
I can email
anybody
it to you.
Wasn't anybody local?
Oh, no, no.
Yeah.
This was a person that was with him, available, even at hotel rooms, even at his home if he was performing, because he was very diligent about rehearsing, but he would do it at different times, and the person was just at his beck and call.
Well, Caruso.
Was the mustache real?
Yes.
In the pictures? Okay. And I didn't understand the wedding picture, the wedding party picture. Where was that taken?
I'm not sure exactly. It almost looked like a rooftop, didn't it?
It did.
It's in New York City.
Okay.
And he was married in New York City. That love story is really, like I said, all his romances, I guess you could say, really are like an opera. You know, he lived for years with a married opera singer who did not live with her husband, and he had a couple of sons by her, but she ran off with the chauffeur. Doesn't that sound like an opera? Yeah. And recently, Christie sold 283 letters that surfaced. When he sailed to Italy, he had left all this personal correspondence with a friend here in the United States. And I think it's the grandson of that man finally sold them. Most of them are in Italian, and I have not learned yet who bought them. But it brought up another lady in Paris that he had quite an affair with. Apparently his romantic letters are quite torrid. And this is before he met Dorothy Benjamin, who was 20 years younger, but she was well into her 20s. Her father was a scientist, and he was an editor of a major science publication. But he had retired, and he was widowed, and he just became a really bitter, controlling person. He hardly let her out of the house or out of his sight, and except for church, and Caruso spotted her one day, and he very cleverly, the father, I hope I'm not telling you too much, but it's such an unusual story. The father hired a young housekeeper that apparently occupied more of the role of wife, and he showered all his attention and money on her and neglected the daughter. So Caruso befriended the man and kept sending him tickets to come to the opera, but he was in 3, so he would see Dorothy. And there are just various ways that there was contriving in order to see each other. And Fayreen, who was from Fort Worth and had married a New York City attorney, was supportive of her and encouraged, she actually helped her physically leave the home in order to marry Caruso. So, as I said, it's like an opera, isn't it?
That's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading that he liked to make scrapbooks.
Yes,
And I wondered
in later life.
if his scrapbooks have been preserved anywhere.
There are some photo albums that Mrs. Caruso gave to the Peabody Institute. A lot of those are online. They're mostly personal. Mm-hmm. But he was quite a collector as well. He collected jewelry, and he had in June of 1920, they had at their Long Island estate a major jewel heist. And actually the day, like the 17th of October, just a couple of days before he came to Fort Worth, the jewel thief was found, but a lot of the jewelry wasn't recovered. He also had a fabulous collection of watches, both contemporary and antique. He loved decorative boxes, mostly antique. He just had, and coins. He had all kinds of coin collections, and I think he even had commemorative coins of himself done that he would give people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about his rise to fame?
His what?
His rise to fame.
Well, he started, of course, in Italy, and I guess he pretty quickly went into leading roles in a couple of years. And although his initial performance, nobody really noticed him that much. And he started traveling around Europe. The Victor Company, actually his first recordings were by a European company, but the Victor Company in their early days sent a man to Europe scouting for talent. And he saw Caruso and he knew this was a major talent. So he signed him. And if you want to look at the Victor recording catalogs, which have wonderful photos of some of the performers and operatic scenes, they're on Hati, H-A-H-T-I Trust, which is a wonderful online site for historians in particular will love them. But there's some wonderful catalogs on there. If he hadn't had the wisdom to do the recordings, the business sense, he probably would not have become a celebrity in the United States and really in North and South America. In South America, he actually had a connection there before he did here. He was well known enough that he went to Buenos Aires in 1897 to perform. He had a 25-year career, even though he died at 48, which in itself kind of tells you he was special. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did he feel about performing at the Coliseum?
Well, there's some legends about that, and the only information that I found was from Lucille Lions herself that was written in the New York Times article, which was about the manager. What I think this idea that he was shocked or that he couldn't even eat or things like that is a little off target, because after all, his manager had been here in August. They knew what kind of situation they were in. Plus, why would he object to the indoor Coliseum when he had performed in Mexico City in the bull ring? You know, outdoors. You know, that just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm sure that that's partly maybe Fort Worth myth about the contrast between what they thought Caruso was used to. He had played in all kinds of venues. The man was a workaholic. He wanted to make money and he wanted to spend money. And actually, he had an incredible schedule. He also, you know, besides the bomb in the theater in Cuba, he also went through the San Francisco earthquake. He was out there performing with an opera company out there. So he didn't perform just with the Metropolitan, he performed with several opera companies in operas. And we actually have, I think it's, as far as his legacy, 280, I believe, recordings. You know, even though we know that they're limited in terms of the actual experience, but, you know, at least we have that, don't we? Yes.
Can you compare and contrast him to Pavarotti in our time?
I think it's pretty similar as far as maybe his voice and so on, but I don't think Pavarotti achieved the global fame that Caruso did as quickly. Those recordings, you have to remember, people didn't have a lot of options like we do today for entertainment or for the fine arts. And those recordings really are what, you know, made the difference. So I'm not quite sure. Other than that, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I remember when Pavarotti came here, and we would have paid anything for a ticket to your.
That's
to
true.
go to
That's
dinner.
true.
And he performed at Yankee Stadium.
Yes.
And he had a big ego.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a big appetite. So
One of the wonderful things about Caruso was such a great sense of humor. So I think sometimes he didn't take himself quite as seriously as some of the singers did. Partly for Carly's entertainment, I brought a book of caricatures, and actually Linda, one of my favorite archivists here, scanned one of them, the one that I used in concert attire, but they are surprisingly sophisticated. There are some done in Cubist style. There are some done with numbers. There's a reversible one, isn't there, Carly, that you were looking at?
I think if it's right side up, it's a self-loaded pin, and if you look at it upside down, it's kind of wrong.
Can you imagine?
no.
And these were all done for an Italian newspaper in New York City. His pastimes were playing cards and doing caricatures. Like when he was, maybe there was rehearsals going on for the opera, he would draw the other singers and all this. The book,
Yeah.
yeah, they're fabulous. They're fabulous caricatures. Yeah, Carly's gonna show us.
It's just a bunch of, he knows a lot of the other opera singers and their costumes and so forth.
Composers, of course he knew, you know, several of the composers whose work he was singing. Because, you know, Puccini and all those people were really popular at that time. Leon Cavallo.
When I was a young man, I remember a subscription series here. That was.
I don't know. She was Lucille Lions.
I don't know. It was Fort Worth Civic something, and they had a Civic Music, yeah, and they had a series.
She was doing them in the 30s, I know that, as well as the 20s. Lucille Lions.
This was a little bit.
That's why I was looking at you. I thought, I don't know about that.
I remember the box office was on the second floor of Washer Brothers. For whatever that's worth.
Well, to me, the way people pulled together in Fort Worth about this concert, it was markedly different from my impression from reading newspapers in the other cities. As I said, you know, it would be the dignitaries, the most important people, but you know, this was to me typified Fort Worth's way of handling, you know, visitors, really. And think about JFK and decorating the hotel room, providing the art. It just seemed part of a tradition here. And to think that that many individuals and businesses, you know, underwrote, made sure that he was going to come. Of course, and he made $26,000. No wonder he loved being here.
Plus his recording sessions.
Yeah, it was a pittance one. Yeah.
It's been many years since I went to one of the events on the north side and read the marker in front of the Coliseum and read the little line about Caruso. And I thank you for all the many, many details you've given us this morning.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I think sometimes details can tell us the real history.
Aren't there some of the pictures posted out there in the Cowtown Coliseum?
Yes.
There were.
Yes.
And they would tell us when we started thinking about it, Fort Worth Opera doing the Caruso in Cowtown, they would say, the Caruso said, oh, I'm not singing here. And the acoustics were so wonderful.
Yeah.
Of course. Now that is probably made up.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
And you know we're doing the Caruso in Cowtown this Thursday
Yes.
with a very prominent singer from the Metropolitan Opera, Stephen Costello, at the Coliseum. And it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, Max and I are going.
Very well received by the Cowboys. You know, the ones who put on the sales of all of, anyway, they're all very much in favor of it. So it's quite a merger of two cultures. Hope you'll come.
We've always dined off.
And you know, when I one time was talking with the director of the opera, he thought the story that showed how opera benefited Fort Worth, how this appearance benefited Fort Worth was, you know, a classic and something that he could sometimes point to. You know, all the hotels were booked. People were selling formal attire and recordings and all of these things. It was just an amazing business boom.
And perfume.
And perfume. Yeah, I actually know Caron, C-A-R-O-N, was what he probably bought because that was the one that he preferred.
Did they shoot the pigeons?
I don't know.
I wonder how they get rid of the pigeons and the odor in there.
I don't know what they did. They probably had some sort of. Well, I can tell you, Lucille Lions didn't do it because she told him she balked at that.
Well, thank you very.
Sure.